Hey everybody, it's Bust with no battles with Bust today. Today we're going to be talking about the 9.2 patch here in Backpack Battles. And so the 9.2 patch is probably the biggest patch in the history of Backpack Battles, at least as far as mechanics are concerned. It most certainly is in the time that I've been here playing Backpack Battles, and so it's a very exciting time to jump in, digest these patch notes, and then jump into some new battles here a little bit later. And so if you haven't caught the notes or if you haven't jumped into the game here in the past couple of days, the skills mechanic is going to be the big thing we're talking about here. If you played Teamfight Tactics and are familiar with augments, or if you played Hearthstone Battlegrounds and are familiar with whatever Blizzard decided to call their stolen version of the augments, that's essentially what we're getting out of the skills here. It's something that comes in the early point of the game and then in a later point of the game. And then it gives you very real build around mechanics as far as your bag and as far as your strategy is concerned. And so you might find something that gives you bonus mana to help with a mana build. You might find something that gives you bonus to your weapon to enhance a weapon build. You might find something that enhances food to boost up your food skill. All across the board, they make it so that the games are a little bit more randomized and you can kind of enhance strategies, build new strategies. It's one of the most popular mechanics out of Teamfight Tactics, and I think it seems to be pretty well executed here. And so to give you a quick primer and debriefing on how these are going to work, we can pull up this sample game I have here. We're on round 4 of this battle, and we're given the option here to purchase one of 3 skills. Investment Opportunity as a economic type item. You have Smelly Wall, which is going to be a bonus to armors or a bonus to a poison build or a bonus to an armor style of build. And then you have its Slime Time down here at the bottom as another bonus to Goobert style builds or a bonus to pet style of builds. And so it's interesting to see that these things pop up in the sense that you have a lot of different angles that you can take with these, a lot of different paths that these can affect as far as your build goes. You can see on the screen here, all of these cost 5 gold. They can turn up on sale, so if it's on sale, you can purchase it for 3, and you do have to purchase one of these. You don't have an option to skip over this. You don't have an option to say, I completely pass on the skills here. You have to take one, but very importantly with these is you can sell it later. So if we want to purchase Investment Opportunity, it's going to come in. We can put it in our bag wherever we want, and then if we're done using this, if it doesn't do anything effectively for the game or our build or at any point in time, we can just sell it and no longer have to deal with it. And so we're going to go across all of these little bonuses as we go through the video. I just wanted to give you a little heads up on how these worked as we started things out here. It's giving you a lot of build around opportunity for your build. There's 20 of them. You're getting the choice of 3. I think the last thing to call out I didn't mention are these are unique. And so we should see some opportunities to where in the shop this changes. I'm not certain. Maybe I've been confused on this. I'm never certain how this works. Let's start this battle and jump into the next round and see if see if I'm right or not on how this actually plays itself out. I've looked at it at various points throughout the game. It doesn't say within the patch notes. We have not used our unique yet. Okay, that's going to be very important as we talk about the remainder of the patch notes. Because I thought this might take up your unique slot, but it does not do that. So with that out of the way, we can jump back into the main screen, talk about the patch notes that are going to be happening, and then I want to jump into each of these skills individually. And so with this set of patches, as far as the neutral items go, there's been a buff to a shovel, which we've been building tons of. Love to see that. And then buffs to all of the wooden bucklers / shields. I think it's a typo here on the wooden buckler. It's been upgraded to prevent 6 damage. It didn't upgrade from 5 to 5. But otherwise, very small changes to the early portion of the game. On down the road, the unstable and stable recombobulators. I hate these items with a passion. They've been buffed even more. I wish they would just take these things out of the game. But hey, why not make the biggest RNG item in the game even stronger? You know, you gotta love seeing that. And then down here at the bottom, the unique items have all caught a boost. This is why I was a little confused with the usage of the skill items. I thought it was kind of an interesting thing to where you can pick a skill and then sell it. And so if you have a unique item in the skill and it's locked in, then you wouldn't be finding any unique items later. And I thought that that was a good reason to come in and potentially buff the unique items that turn up within the shop. It doesn't seem to be the case. It just seems like they upgraded all of them. I'm not certain at what point these get too good, but it feels like there's been a real push here over the past 3 or 4 patches to make these unique items stronger. I know I got completely annihilated by a villain sword in some of my battles yesterday, and so maybe these are getting to the point to where the developers are happy with it. As far as the remainder of the buffs and nerfs go, the Pyromancer catches a buff to friendly fire. I was very surprised to see this, as I thought it was the strongest Pyromancer build over the course of the previous patch, and so I expect to see friendly fires to be really popping off in this upcoming patch, especially as a lot of the skills do interact very positively with the super high flame mechanic, so we'll see what comes out of it. Dragons caught a minor buff, that's fine. Frostbite, I'm not certain how crazy this is for the Frostbite itself. It does get damage scaling off of the number of colds on the opponent, so it does less base damage but inflicts more colds. I would love to see more options and angles for the Pyromancer other than making its one really good item really good. And so, or I'm sorry, as far as Frost Mages go, with the Frost Bite being the key build around item. If you get it, you win. If you don't get it, you lose. I would rather see other things for the Frost Mage other than tinkering with that. But it kind of is what it is. My big point of hatred as far as this patch goes is the Vineweave Basket. I really hate seeing these changes to the Vineweave Basket. This is exactly what I called out with the previous patch with what was going to happen, in the sense that the healing is so bad. Like, how do you actually edit the Vineweave Basket to make it more relevant? You either completely change it, you edit the healing, which is one of the worst mechanics in the game, or you tinker with the sale chance, which is basically just giving you RNG opportunities to make more money. You don't just say, okay, the Vineweave Basket gets 1 gold every turn throughout the course of the game. It gets this really, really, really RNG-centric sale chance thing, to where you go into the first round of the battle, you try to find as many on-sale items as you can. If they fit your theme, great. You're just off to a super high roll race. You're going to have a strong chance throughout the round. If you're out here rolling and looking for on-sale items and you just get a bunch of garbage, you're just completely hamstrung from the beginning of the game, and you're going to lose. And so while I do like a lot of the economic choices that give you agency, right? They give you decision making in terms of what you're going to do with your build. So say something like building a piggy bank, and how long do I hang on to this piggy bank? How long do I hang on to this bonus health? Do I ever want to upgrade this? Do I ever want to destroy it? You have a lot of good choices that are built in with the piggy bank, all which are known factors for as far as what's going to happen. With things like the unstable recombobulators and the sale chance on the Vineweave Basket, it's all just RNG centric. And so the choice that you get to make is, okay, well, let me roll the dice again and see if something big turns up. And if I roll the dice and RNGesus blesses me, then we're off to the races. If I roll the dice and miss, I'm going to lose. There's not a lot of agency in that, and so I don't really like that that design on the Vineweave Basket. And the worst is happening, right? We're just going to keep upgrading the sale chance until it gets too good, and that kind of chart of LP gain off the Vineweave Basket just gets bigger and bigger in terms of the way I try to describe it is, if your average LP game per game is 5, it's very structured, and it feels like very good progression when you say gain 7 and then you lose 4 and then you gain 8 and then you lose 5 and then you gain 3 and then you lose 2. Like a very tight pattern of wins and losses kind of shows that your progression is happening. When you have these very RNG centric items like the Vineweave Basket, it's just this huge up and down curve, to where games where I high rolled I won, games where I low rolled I lost, and it's a very sharp curve as far as the LP goes. And so I'll quit talking about that. That's not the big choice of the day, but I just get inflamed as I see these kind of changes. Otherwise, big bowl of treats, nerfed a little bit, still extremely strong, still should be the core Ranger build around. Piercing Arrow upgraded a little bit, and Belladonna's Whisper upgraded a little bit as well. As far as the Reaper goes, the Relic Case nerfed again and again. I'm surprised to see the Relic Case nerf here, as I felt like the as we played the Reaper over the past week, that the poison bag was the preferred bag every time. So I felt like they'd kind of hit the mark with the relic case. Looks like I was wrong with that. And then some other minor upgrades across the board. It does at least give me a little validity in my thoughts and my ability to be getting a little bit better at this game, as the snake does catch a nerf. As I was finishing off Reaper Week last week, my suggestion was just to go snake every single game, regardless of what was offered to you or what bag you had. And so if I was able to figure that out on my own, then there was certainly a problem here with the snake. And so let's move my face, jump into these skills, and give each of them a little chit chat here. And so, to me, as we jump into the skills discussion, the thing that really comes into light with the skills is I'm trying to think of a word for it. Polarity is the one that comes into mind, but the big decision is going to come around whether or not you want to jump into the survival rounds. And I don't feel like that was a very big decision as I was early on starting within the game. It always felt like if you were strong enough to get to the survival round, you should jump on. But as I've gotten better and better at the game and time has progressed, it feels like jumping into the survival rounds is something that I've wanted to do less and less. I've always talked about the kind of idea and concept that exists within games like Teamfight Tactics, to where certain builds are very good at getting first, right? They might be good at getting first or second, or if they lose, they're going to get like fifth or sixth if the build doesn't come together. And then there's lots of builds that are good at getting like third or fourth. You don't get a ton of LP every time, but they're very consistent. They're very strong. They come together almost every single game. And I felt like we were starting to really kind of deduce and pick out when we were able to make that jump, right? We were finding lots of food builds and lots of low level builds that were very good at getting survival that would just get annihilated in the later rounds. And then we were kind of identifying the builds that would be able to actually be successful within the survival rounds. And I think that the skills bring to the table here is it's really going to make that decision much more important as we come in and say, look at a very early game centric item like the spicy banana. This is something that is incredibly powerful in the early game. This is something that's incredibly strong going through the early portions of the rounds. But as you get to the survival rounds, this does literally nothing. This is not something that you want to be taking into the late game. And so if you were trying to devise a build that was using the healing that comes out of the banana, and you've got like 4 bananas taking up 12 slots within your core build, you're not doing anything within the survival rounds. And so what I think that these augments, or what these skills are really going to be adding to the table, is really making you decide as to whether or not you're going to be strong enough to carry into the late game, if that's something that your build even wants to do, and how you want to handle that throughout the course of the battle. And so I think as we progress through our battles over the course of the next few weeks, we're really going to be making much earlier decisions as far as, is this a build that's going to be pushing to round 10 or 12, whatever it is for the survival round, or is this going to be a build that's pushing very heavily into the late game and trying to push on and get that very maximum LP or maximum backpack battles points, whatever we're going to be calling that. And so it's very interesting to say, make the decision early on, do I want something like a spicy banana? Do I want one of these late game centric items like Mana Mastery? Can I take an item like Mana Mastery early that does absolutely nothing at round 4? You really need it for a late game build, but risk not seeing it later. And so there should be a lot of interesting decisions that come out of these, and I'm very interesting to see how this plays out. As far as my practice games have gone over the past couple of days, I've been really excited in the agency and the decision making that comes out of these skills, and I think it's just a huge bonus to the depth of the gameplay that we get here. And so to talk about these skills individually, it's worth noting there are 12 general skills. These will turn up for any class regardless of which one you are, and then there's 2 skills for each of the other classes. So 2 for the Ranger, 2 for the Reaper, 2 for the Pyromancer, 2 for the Berserker. I am not certain if any of these are gated as far as what point of the game that they will turn up in. So say maybe the Spicy Banana only shows up at round 4, and then the Dark Ritual only shows up at round 10. I don't think that that's a thing. I think any of these can show up at any given time, but I might be wrong on that. I'll all I have to go on is the patch notes that they're delivered and experience, and I think I've seen each of these at each stage of the game. But to talk about these individually, we'll cut through the general ones first and then go into each of the classes. The first one up here is the Spicy Banana, and this is a very powerful early game item in the sense that everyone uses stamina, right? You don't have to be in a mage build wanting flames. You don't have to be in a food build. You don't even really need bananas for this to do anything. This is probably what I think is going to be our biggest catch-all skill that we'll take in the early game, given that heal for stamina used is so strong. This is a much higher rate of healing that you would get out of, say, multiple healing herbs or even like a healing herbs and a food. And so this almost guarantees that you'll win any early game centric round. I've had much success with the Spicy Banana, but as we kind of mentioned earlier, this does fall off late. Getting 20, 30 points of heal in the late game isn't what's going to hard carry you into the later rounds. And so it's very kind of psychologically interesting to just like hard tear through 7 wins in a row and then just start to tank as your build was very early game centric, but not late game centric. But it'll be interesting with these, right? If you're able to pick up the Spicy Banana, it does allow you to then push a lot of economy focused items and try and use that to push into the later game, given that the heal on this is so strong. After that, you have a very similar item in the Smelly Wall. Very strong sustain coming out of the Garlics, getting an additional +5 armor. I don't think going for the full-on wall is worth it. This is a very picture-perfect item in terms of describing something that's good in the early game but bad in the late game. You can most certainly try and build this. Like I know it's hard to see on the screen here, but there it is. It's like as far as these 10 hexes of Garlics go. If you want to take your 11 hex garlic item into the late game, you're more than welcome. You're going to get annihilated, but having 2 garlic in the early game and getting an extra 30 or 40 or 50 armor over the course of a battle is exceptionally strong. And so very worth noting that there are some really high-powered, sustain-heavy skills in the Spicy Banana and the Smelly Wall, but they do fall off in strength as the game progresses. Moving forward, we have the Piggy Pinata. With this, it was very interesting to me. I used it once. It seems like the pigs blow up and generate 10 gold worth of items. That may have just been the game that I played it in. I think I blew up 2 piggy banks and both of them blew up 10 gold, so maybe 10 gold is roughly what you can expect out of it. But this is one that I wasn't the hugest fan of. I guess the 10 gold point makes sense if we're going to say that a broken piggy bank from the hammer generates 5 gold, right? Or a 10 gold item, we sell the pile of gold for 5, so it's 10 there. I guess that makes sense at the end of the day. But this is one that I was never really actively seeking. It seems like something that the Offering Bowl Pyromancer might be interested in, since they have so much value in getting those early game piggy banks with the hammer and putting the mixtures into the Offering Bowl. Maybe to a lesser degree, the Ranger is kind of okay with this, but it's not the kind of item that I want to be taking and then looking for piggy banks. As you get into round 5 and round 6, the chances of finding them are so low that it feels like you're just kind of wasting a skill. And so I wasn't the hugest fan of this. It felt like a very niche offering as far as something that you'll want. The investment opportunity is strong. This is the one that we made point of in the early game. To me, this is one that we just look for this gold gain, and if we find anything that gains health off of it, then that's just a little bit of extra bonus. In the games that I played, there's not a ton of items that actually use buffs in the early game. You find yourself with the vampiric style of items that will use hearts to turn into other stuff, but for the most part, there aren't a lot of ways to actually come out and activate this outside of going towards mana items. And so I think this is something that we'll look to pick up, probably never sell until the super late game when that 1 gold doesn't matter too much, and then not really get any activations out of this other ability. And so it's reasonable. I much prefer sustaining hearts and sustaining our life total throughout the game, and so I've been placing preference on things like Spicy Banana and Smelly Wall over investment opportunity, but that kind of is what it is. Otherwise, up next, the super spacious bags appear more often. They have a 40% chance to be on sale, and then for each free slot around this, the items offer 5% faster. It's a little bit easier to see if you click on the item itself. The starred items activate faster to where the diamonds give it that bonus. And so it's a fairly powerful item. I haven't found the build that is really interested and excited about this. This is a bag that I actually just need to devote more games to. There's a lot of power inherently tied into this thing in the sense that you have to be buying bags round after round after round. It should make the bags roughly 25% less, right? If a bag shows up like half the time and then half the time it's going to be 50% off, then that seems like it should just be in general bags are about 25% less. That may be completely off and wrong, but this is the kind of item that should give you, roughly 10 or 15 gold over the course of the game. And that's a fairly high value. And then this extra 5% bonus is quite big. Putting 20% bonus on the one item that you actually care about is very strong. And so you don't have to look at this thing and say, oh boy, can I get maximum value out of this and get 4 items up to plus 20% bonus? You don't have to look at it like that, right? You can say, does this item give me like 10, 15 gold over the course of the game? And then it gives one item I really care about plus 20% bonus, and then it gives another item I kind of minimally care about another 20% bonus, then that's exceptionally strong. And so it is a very good item. This is all theory craft to me, but I think that that's the way that it's going to play out. That the super spacious, the way that you're going to kind of get trapped into super spacious is the way you get trapped into using a goobert, right? To where you say, oh man, I've bought this goobert, I have to get maximum value out of it, so I have to arrange my bag in a real fucky way to make sure that I'm getting all of this activations on the goobert to where it should be playing kind of a minimal role in what you're doing, especially as the game progresses on. And I think if we get in that kind of mindset as we use super spacious, as to where this is just going to generate us a bunch of gold on things that we have to spend money on anyways, and then my one good item is getting a 20% bonus, then I think that you'll have a lot of success with this right out the gates. Up next, we have the slime time. The gooblings appear in the shop. That's a 1 hex goobert. And then the 1 hex gooberts, I think, heal for 5. And so, as far as I can tell, there aren't any other big build around kind of things for these gooblings, right? You don't build 4 gooblings into a mega goobert or anything like that. They just come along and give you these additional pets. And so I'm curious if there isn't some kind of big build around with these things. This is another one I haven't had the chance to build with, but as you do have these 1 hex gooberts, you can kind of push them together and have like a big chain or a big block of gooberts all activating off of each other, and there might be something within there. I'm just not certain how feasible it is to purchase a bunch of these. It does look like they cost, no, the slime time costs 5 gold. I'm just not certain how feasible that kind of thing is, or how excited a pet build is to even want to spend their hexes on this. And so this is one I have to leave it just kind of up in the air. I'm not quite certain on it. I have to get a little bit of more experience. Up next is Shielded. This is a very reasonable, just kind of generalist skill, right? We talked about that you have to purchase a skill, and if you do come into a battle to where you have, say, like Shielded, and then you have, say, the piggy bank thing, and then you have the mana generator, then you might find yourself just stuck taking Shielded. I haven't found any kind of build that is super excited about having Shielded in it, but there's also no builds that are upset about having this. And so if you don't want it, you can just buy it and sell it, but it is a nice kind of fallback thing in a world to where I find pretty much every single game I've been building a thorn buckler and then upgrading to a different shield later. So it's like never doing nothing, but it's not the kind of mind-blowing thing that's just going to carry you off into the late game. After that, we have Stoned. As far as Stoned goes, the big thing with this is the second line, right? When you have armor, you have a 40% chance to prevent hits from being critical. This is exactly the same as I was talking about with the Shielded, right? If you run into one of these weird sections to where you're offered up a piggy bank, you're offered up a mana item, and you're offered up a Stoned, you might find yourself just having to take Stoned because it should be never dead, right? You should always have some kind of opportunity within pretty much every build to have some armor armor at some point. And even if you don't, it's not that hard to go a little bit out of your way to put a garlic in your build so you have armor sometimes and you get some critical prevention. And so I don't think you ever want to be going for the stone item build around thing. I think that's a real gotcha. You're just taking this for the crit prevention. So that you take a little bit damage and have a bit more sustain. After that, we have hardwood. I'm certain that there's a build somewhere with this. I just haven't found what it is. I'm not certain if that build is trying to use common melee weapons or if the build is actually trying to use the armor gain. I don't think that you want to be doing both. And so someone smarter than me will have to come up with a build with this. I'm not immediately seeing the build that comes with it. This might be the kind of item to where you use it from round 4 to round 8, and then you just sell it when you sell off your early game weapons. Like, that's something that could most certainly be a thing. But I think this is another one to where you don't want to build around it, and you don't want to keep it for a long time. And so I'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But I've never had a build to where I've wanted to have hardwood. I've never had a build to where I was like, oh boy, if hardwood shows up, I'm just going to be winning. Just every time I look at it, I grab the item, I swirl it around the build, see that it doesn't get activated on anything, and then I just immediately skip past it. And so there might be something here, but I'm not seeing it. It always seems worse than just taking shielded or just taking stoned. After that, we have Mana Mastery, which is a very interesting one to me. To me, this is one that you're going to build around poorly. You're going to be taking this on round 4 frequently. You're going to wonder why you're losing so hard, and then you're going to realize that reason is Mana Mastery. This is something that you can take early if you're high rolling and looking to build into a mana build, but I think that this is something that you have to just be taking on the second go around. It's so bad in the early game. There's so few items that can even use mana. There's so few magic items that you're just not going to get any real usage out of this. The kind of caveat to that would be is if you somehow make an early mana torch to where you can get a lot of activations off of it, then the Mana Mastery is probably ready to pop off. But outside of a fringe scenario to where you've started with a torch and a blueberries and you're willing to high roll on trying to find a health potion to get all of that together, this thing doesn't really have much early game power. But this is something that will really propel you in the late game. This is the kind of item to where when you're trying to make that decision, can I push from the survival rounds into a late game winner? Mana Mastery is absolutely the kind of skill that will push you in that direction. If you've got the build around with some wands and some blueberries hanging out, and you just need like one prismatic orb to really have the entirety of the build come together, then Mana Mastery will shoot you up into that really high power echelon of just crushing through the survival rounds and being able to carry you through that. And so very interesting to me to see this kind of distinction and the need to make the recognition for when these items are good, right? And so something like Spicy Banana, very good early, very terrible late. Things like Mana Mastery, very terrible early, very strong late. And so making the distinction of when these items are good, when they're going to power spike, when that power spike fails, is what's going to be very important with these skills across the board. After that, we have Power of the Moon. This is a very interesting one in the sense that it seems like it should just be a late game item, right? It has activators on Moon Armor, activator on Moon Shield, but I've been incredibly surprised with the fatigue elements to this. Not even just playing towards some kind of like Reaper fatigue build, but more so in the sense of just catching this big heal. Getting a 40% heal for doing nothing is pretty powerful, and I've run into a handful of games as to where it's like, you're early in the early game, you're getting to that point of the battle to where everybody is chunked down to like half health and fatigue starts, and then the opponent just immediately heals to full. And you're like, what the fuck just happened? They don't have any health potions, they don't have any banana-like sustain, and you're like, oh, they have Power of the Moon. That's where it caught us. And so with this one, I'm really kind of undecided on. I think that there's a lot of tricks going on with this in the sense that building around Moon Armor and building around Moon Shields is probably a bait. I think that element of this is something that you should probably just ignore. And if it comes together, then great, but that's not something you want to actively build around. The fatigue starts earlier. You can touch on a little bit. There are some builds that, if you're going for an OTK Ranger build, right? If you're a Clover Ranger trying to crit your opponent out in the first 2 seconds of the game, probably not too interested in hitting fatigue. But if you're in a more grindy build like a Pyromancer Flame build or a food build, then you can kind of hone in on that fatigue starts earlier and try and get some usage out of it. But at the end of the day, I think the big thing with this is just the heal. Getting that big heal for 40% of your health scales throughout the entirety of the game. It's good early, it's good late, assuming you have a build that can get to fatigue. And I think that is the main piece to take away from this. The big thing out of the Power of the Moon is the heal. Everything else is kind of incidental out of it. Last but not least, we have smithing for dummies, and this is one that I thought was very interesting in multiple ways. And so when you purchase it, you get a whetstone. So if you want to, you can just purchase this for 5, get the whetstone, sell the smithing, sell the whetstone, and then you have your 5 gold back. So it's like you didn't have to invest in a skill if you didn't want to, but it made it kind of interesting to me in the sense of generating long swords and generating falcon blades and the like, and being able to know that you have a pretty high percentage chance going into round 4 that you're going to get a whetstone, and what can you do to build around that. And so it gives you a lot of incentive to, in the early game, purchase short sword whetstone, and then just see where it goes in terms of building a hero sword, hero longsword, falcon blade, knowing that you have a very real chance to have this thing turn up in the early game. And so again, I'm not certain how skills work, if it's just a random collection of 3 that turns up in every early game, or if something like smithing for dummies is a higher percentage chance than, say, a class weapon turning up early. Like, I'm not certain if there's any gamesmanship within that, but classes that are very interested in building hero swords are very interested in knowing that smithing for dummies exists. On top of that, the minus 20% stamina out of crafted weapons is fucking huge. I'm not certain what the build is that really wants to look towards this this huge bonus, but out of all of these items across the board, the thing that I think out of these common items is most likely to get nerfed in a future patch is the minus 20% stamina bonus coming out of smithing for dummies. And so again, like, I'm not entirely certain what the build looks for. I'm sure it has some kind of flame whip inside of it and then something else, but that is an absolutely massive stamina reduction percentage. This is the amount of stamina to where you now just get to carry an extra weapon without going into fatigue or going into stamina drain. And I'm very interested to find the break point to where this just gets exceptionally good. And so the very interesting thing coming out of smithing for dummies, one that's very good early, very good late, gets you a lot of build around potential in that early game. Very well done, but I think this one's going to have to be tuned. So moving away from the general ones, you have some very specific things that come out of the Ranger and down the path. I'm very curious to see how we feel about these as time goes on. And what I want to kind of focus in on that is if you look at something like the Acorn Ace, the Acorn Collar is a generalist item that fits within any build, to where the Markswoman is something that only fits in with ranged builds. Now, granted, there are a lot of ranged weapons within the Ranger. The wands are all ranged and the bows are all ranged, and so it's very on theme with the Ranger, but I'm curious to see how these kind of high roll items play out, in the sense that, do you now need to build your Ranger just ignoring all of the ground based weapons, knowing how powerful an item like Markswoman is, or do we even need to take that into consideration? Or if this turns up in round 4, do you want to build around it, or do you want to pre-build around it and then just be fucked in the late game if it doesn't turn up? And so I'm curious how that will all play out. Some of these other classes play out the same way, as to where there are specific items that get called out with it. I was trying to think of one of these that wasn't as generalist. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought, but nonetheless, I'm curious to see how that plays in the future. But as far as these items go, Acorn Ace is quite good. I immediately read it at first and said, oh, crit wood staffs, let's just ignore it, right? But it does play out interestingly across the board. Getting the extra spaces on the acorn collar is quite nice, especially as you look to build things like falcon blades, to where the falcon blade wanted to be directly next to your items, but putting it next to an acorn was shitty. Getting this extra space around it is very interesting, and then the items getting that stamina bonus is quite nice. I ran into a lot of builds that just didn't care about crit wood staffs. This was an item that felt good across the board, getting that minus stamina bonus regardless of how the build went. This is why I'm kind of curious as to why the whetstone thing was at minus 20%, because minus 10% to me was just good enough. And so seeing the minus 20% on the whetstone thing was kind of crazy. But nonetheless, Acorn Ace is very good. Markswoman, very good as well. Very easy to build around in the sense of getting this huge bonus onto weapons that you're already using. Any kind of Clover build Ranger just immediately goes off the charts with Markswoman. A very powerful thing here. No real denying that this is strong. Moving into the ones for the Reaper, I haven't had a chance to play with the Mushroom Farm. This strikes me as an extremely high rolly type item. We'll have to see. I know I've seen on Reddit people posting images of going ham with the Mushroom Farm. I think that's probably just a super high roll, but I haven't had a chance to play with this, and so it's tough for me to really get a feel for how good the Mushroom Farm is. In my play with the Reaper over the past week, with the Fly Agarics, I felt like they were extremely good early, extremely bad late, and so I'm curious to see how this ties in with that. Afterwards, we have the Dark Ritual. After 15 seconds, you inflict 20 debuffs and gain 10 poison, or you gain 10 vampiric, which is quite strong, and then it triggers faster for each dark item within it. And so to me, these dark items inflicting debuffs are never that good. To me, the real power coming out of the Dark Ritual is the 10 vampiric that comes from it, right? So if you inflict 20 debuffs on your opponent, you inflict 7 poison, nobody cares. You inflict 7 blind, which kind of sucks, and you inflict 7 frost, which is ignorable. That just never really does enough. But if you look at this as something that gains 10 Vampiric, you're already using it with a Nocturnal Locklifter to be popping off with Vampiric, then I think that that's where the real value in this comes from. Moving into the next one, we have the Pyromancer. The Burning Sword bonuses are very interesting. The gaining flames, 4 flames, isn't that big of a deal, but the Burning Sword things are quite strong, as they do scale on their own. When the Burning Blade hits, you get to gain the flame, and then that comes in and tends to drain out your stamina. And so keeping the Burning Swords blazing later throughout the battle is quite interesting, but this is one that can minorly fail, right? If the right components don't come together at the right time, you might be left with an item that doesn't do anything, but I think that will be the big thing here, is getting those big, gigantic stamina drains keeping you battling on. As far as the Solaris goes, this one I haven't had the chance to use, so it's tough for me to decide on. It does feel like there should be a lot of back and forth scaling between the Sun Shield and the Sun Armor, but I'm not quite certain how that plays out. This ultimately feels like a super weak one to me. As you are looking to build towards Sun Armor, you're clearing your debuffs as it is anyways, so clearing 20 debuffs doesn't really do anything, but it's all going to come down to this interaction between the Sun Shield and the Sun Armor and how much those bonuses go. Because I guess the Sun Armor does gain like 14 armor on each activation here, and so it might be actually capable of scaling up. It's just, as I look at a lot of these style of builds like the Solaris, you have to be like, okay, well, I need the Sun Armor, which is expensive, the Sun Shield, which is expensive, then I need to build in some kind of flame generator, so it's like I might need a flame whip, and then my flame whip needs the pineapples to pop off, and like if all of this comes together, then I guess this will pop off and take you into a super late game, but it feels like this is the times when it comes together are going to be so infrequent that the times that it doesn't come together, you just lose and don't make up for it. And so I'm not really sold on this. It seems like you'll see some YouTube videos of people going off with this, but in practice, it's not going to be that strong. Last but not least, we have 2 items left. The Extra Agony, giving you hang on, what was that? I read it wrong. When the battle rage ends after 4 seconds, enter battle rage for 50% of the duration. Hang on, I haven't used this one. I haven't played the Berserker yet this week. So when the battle rage ends, you wait a little bit and then you go back into battle rage again. That's fine. I'm not certain to where you want this to get used. To me, this is one that would be very good with the utility bag, to where you hit battle rage at 5 seconds. So you carry battle rage for like 5 seconds to the, say, 11-second mark. That's too far. You probably get 5 seconds plus 2 is reasonable, right? So 7, that would carry you to the 11-second mark. Then when fatigue hits, you get this again. That's kind of fine. But I think with the minus 50% health one, you're going to find too many times that the battle just ends before this ever does anything. And so need to keep that in mind. This is probably very bag-centric. And then after that, the dragon set, for every 1 second during battle range, gate of flame. That's shitty. If you have the armor, the boots, and the claws, you get 2% lifesteal for each flame up to 20%. This is just garbage. And so easy peasy. I got that one nailed down for you. Even with the flame whip builds coming out of the anvil that we kind of touched on with the Berserker, I don't think like getting 20% lifesteal is what was ever hampering that build from being good. And so I think this all just sounds like garbage. All right, well, interesting. A lot to go over, a lot to digest, a lot to bring down. Very interesting mechanics coming through. And so, agree, disagree, let me know what you think about the skills. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to get your feedback, because that is going to do it for us today. So if everyone enjoyed the video, hope you maybe learned a thing or two along the way, and you had a good time watching. This is Busted Me. Thank you for being here.